Yeah. Remember those. That was a kumsitz, a gathering of friends to sing, led by the Moshav band, doing Mizmor LeDavid, the 29th Psalm, in a Carlebach melody, in the raucous way that we do it at Friday night services as we welcome Shabbos. How are you, my holy sisters and brothers? It's a Sunday night. We've got some spectacular learning to do tonight. Let's light up the darkness. All right, very excited about tonight. We're going to be completing our journey through chapter 9 here of Tractate Pesachim, the fourth volume of the Talmud, the laws of Passover. And we will open our discussion of the final chapter of this tractate, chapter 10. And we're finally going to get into stuff that's much more recognizable to us in the modern world. Chapter 10 is about the order of the Passover night. Order in Hebrew is Seder. Seder means the order of activities that we do on Passover night. So we're going to begin to discuss the Seder, and specifically tonight we'll be talking about the 4 cups of wine. A very beautiful teaching will come from the sages along those lines, and a real practical teaching of how we can make it super relevant today. First, however, we're going to finish our journey through chapter 9, as I mentioned, the last Mishna and its discussion, and embedded there is one of those pithy little sayings you're going to want to take home. In fact, it's in the title of the show, but when we understand its context, it will be even better. Who is with us tonight as we get it going on a fine Sunday night? Stephen in New Hampshire, Yehuda in South Carolina, Michael in Scranton, Bill in Berkeley, Nancy in North Carolina, James says shalom, Pauline in Arkansas, Renee in Indy, Lucy in Minnesota, Jeff in Arizona. Michael says about time grabbing a cuppa. Sharon in Lebanon, Paula in the house, John in Memphis, Crystal in Canada, Emily in Houston. Crystal says that tune makes me want to dance. Randy says shalom from Florida. Rochelle says Shavua Tov, a good week, the traditional greeting as we begin a new week. We say it from Saturday night forward in the week. And about midweek, we can already start saying good Shabbos if we like. Over there on the YouTube side, Marjorie in Georgia, Lynn in North Texas, Marasia says Shavua Tov. Welcome, everybody. Great to be with you. Tonight's episode of AT Daily is dedicated by Valerie Schweitzer for the healing of Chaya F. May Chaya F have a complete healing of body, mind, spirit, everything. Her healing should be absolutely complete and miraculously quick. And we say amen. And Valerie, may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessing. Thank you for supporting our nonprofit and making this class possible. If you'd like to dedicate an episode of AT Daily, go to donate.accidentaltalmudist.org, and there are instructions there for dedicating an episode of this class. All right, let us get into it. We'll finish up chapter 9 with the final Mishna. So here, chapter 9, Mishnah number 9 on page 99 of the Talmud, of Tractate Pesachim in the Talmud. And then we'll open chapter 10 with the first Mishnah discussing the Seder and specifically the 4 cups of wine. With regard to a group whose Paschal lamb was lost, and they said to one member of the group, "Go and search for our Paschal lamb, and when you find it, slaughter it on our behalf." And he went and found the missing offering and slaughtered it on behalf of the entire group. But in the meantime, they took a different animal and slaughtered it as a Paschal lamb. The law is as follows. So just to review, what's the situation? The temple is standing in Jerusalem, so we're 2,000 years ago or more. Jews are up in Jerusalem for Passover. They've made the pilgrimage to celebrate the festival. Groups of people have agreed to share. Each group has agreed to share a Paschal offering, either a lamb or a young goat. The people have to agree in advance to be part of the group that will share a lamb. Sometimes the lamb was lost. This is a big problem because then the people won't be able to fulfill their obligation and they would have to return a month later for Pesach Sheni. Now that the lamb is lost, not so surprising, the group might say, let's split up and look for it and see if we can find it. But as it's getting closer and closer to the deadline, now they have the problem. What if somebody finds it and doesn't have time before the deadline to get back to the group and say, hey, I found it? Maybe that person's just going to find it and run it into the temple to get it slaughtered on time before the time limit expires. So how are we going to handle that situation? And now this Mishnah, it's a rather lengthy Mishnah, is going to explore all the different possibilities of what can happen in that situation, depending on, did the one that went off by himself find the lamb before the rest of the group said, you know what, he's not going to come back in time, let's just get a replacement lamb, so at least we'll have fulfilled our obligation. And then he finds the one that he searched for, so if he slaughters his first, it's one condition. If the other group slaughters their replacement lamb before the one who went off slaughters his, that's a different condition. And depending on what instructions they gave him when he went off to do his kind of independent search party, and what possible instructions he gave them about what would happen if they found the original lamb before they reunited with him, all of these factors will influence the outcome of how they should handle that situation. So in the case where the lamb was lost, they said to one of the members of the group, go and search, and when you find it, slaughter it on our behalf. And he went and he found the missing offering and he slaughtered it on behalf of the group. But in the meantime, they took a replacement animal, thinking that maybe he never found or got there in time. So they took a replacement animal and they slaughtered it as a Paschal lamb. The halacha, the law is as follows. If his Paschal lamb was slaughtered first, he eats from his offering, as he is considered to be registered specifically for that offering, right? Obviously, he no longer considers himself to be registered in any other, he doesn't even know that they took another lamb, but that's the original lamb, and he found it, and he slaughtered it, so of course he considers himself to be slaughtered on the original lamb. Unlike the other group, right? Because he included them in. Now he included the other people in his offering, and it belongs to the entire group. So the second animal does not actually have any registrants. It was slaughtered after the first one, right? Let me make sure. He slaughtered first, right? So he slaughtered on behalf of himself and his whole group. He's not aware that while he was gone, they took a replacement animal. So he slaughtered as was intended for himself and the group. They slaughtered a lamb after the group's lamb had already been slaughtered on their behalf. So what did they actually do? And if they, so the second animal therefore doesn't have any registrants. It's a Paschal lamb that was slaughtered without registrants. It is unfit to be eaten. They slaughtered it. Okay, that's that's irreversible. But no one can eat that meat because it was slaughtered as a Paschal lamb without anyone registered to it. And as we learned before, in that situation, that meat, because it's consecrated, it's holy, can only be used for its designated holy purpose. Now it's disqualified from being used for that purpose, so it must be burned. It can't be eaten. And if theirs was slaughtered first, okay, they sent him out to look for the group's lamb. He went out and looked for it. They said he's not coming back. They got a replacement lamb, and they slaughtered that one first, and then he slaughtered the original group's lamb. So in that situation, and if theirs was slaughtered first, they eat from theirs, because by slaughtering a replacement lamb, they evidence that they have withdrawn from the original lamb and transferred their membership, as it were, their registration to this new lamb, and that new lamb was slaughtered first. So they are Yotze, their obligation has been fulfilled by slaughtering that lamb, and they eat from it. and they eat from theirs because they withdrew from the original offering through the act of slaughtering the replacement. And he, the one who went off to look for the original lamb, he eats from his because he was not registered for the replacement offering sacrificed by the remainder of the group. He was off looking for the original. He didn't come back, so he clearly was still thinking that he's part of the original. He didn't join that group. He was away from them, so he can still slaughter his. It remains valid because it was not without registrants. He remained registered for that lamb, so he slaughters it and he eats it, and they slaughter the replacement and they eat it. Now they've become two groups that are separate. And if it is not known which of the offerings was slaughtered first, and that's how we're going to go through this series of cases. So if the original one got slaughtered first, if the replacement one got slaughtered first, or if they don't know which one was slaughtered first, and if it is not known which of the offerings was slaughtered first, or if both the group and the individual slaughtered them together, why would they do that? Maybe they were confused about the law, what to do, or maybe because there were large groups slaughtering the Passover lambs in the courtyard of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. It could be that they were part of the same group slaughtering at the same time and never saw each other. The agent of the group with the new lamb, along with the guy they sent out to look for the original who found it and brought it into the temple. They might be part of the same session of people shechting their lamb, but not realize that they were in the temple courtyard at the same time. So if it's not known which slaughtered first, or if it was probably slaughtered at the same time, slaughter them together, then he eats from his. He, the one who went out to look for the original, he eats from his, and they do not eat with him in case theirs was slaughtered first. And theirs must be taken out to the place designated for burning. The offering slaughtered by the group may not be eaten due to the concern that it was slaughtered second, and the members of the group would therefore have been included in the first offering. However, they are exempt from performing the offering of the Paschal lamb a month later on Pesach Sheni, the second Passover, which is the makeup for people who missed the first one, because they were included in the slaughter of whichever animal was slaughtered first. It is only due to the external circumstances that they cannot complete the mitzvah by eating the Paschal lamb, and this does not prevent them from fulfilling their obligation. They did, in fact, slaughter a Paschal lamb. They just weren't able to do the second part of the mitzvah, which is to eat it that night. Nevertheless, they are considered to have fulfilled their obligation. They don't have to come back at Pesach Sheni. A somewhat different case of a lost Paschal lamb would occur if the group had sent one member as an agent to search for the lost animal, and the agent said to the other members of the group before he left, "If I am late, go and slaughter a Paschal lamb for me." He then went and found the lost Paschal lamb and slaughtered it, and they took another animal and slaughtered it as a Paschal lamb. In that case, if theirs was slaughtered first, they eat from theirs, and he eats with them because he requested to be included in their offering, and they registered him for their Paschal lamb. And if his was slaughtered first, he eats from his, and they eat from theirs, because the fact that they slaughtered a different animal indicates that they have withdrawn from the original offering. But the fact that he slaughtered his, shows that he intended to stay with it, and so now they just eat separately, but they both get to eat. He from the original lamb, and they from the replacement lamb. But if it is not known which of the animals was slaughtered first, or if both the group and the individual slaughtered them together, so then they eat from theirs because they definitely withdrew from the original offering by slaughtering a different one, and he does not eat with them because he also intended to be included in the animal that he slaughtered, and it is not clear which was slaughtered first. Therefore, the original lamb, must be taken out to the place designated for burning, and he is exempt from performing the sacrifice of the Paschal lamb on the second Pesach. But in that case, they get to both slaughter and eat it that night. He's fulfilled his obligation because he slaughtered, but he doesn't get to eat that night, and nonetheless, he's considered as if he fulfilled his obligation, doesn't have to come back a month later. Another case, if he said to them that if he is delayed, they should include him in their Paschal lamb, and they said to him that if he finds the original offering, he should slaughter it on their behalf, so they both gave instructions saying, "You are my agent. If you guys slaughter, I'm included with you." They say, "If you find, we're included with you." And they said to him that if he finds the original, he should slaughter it on their behalf. So then all of them eat from the first sacrifice that was slaughtered. And if it is not known which of them was slaughtered first, both of them must be taken out to the place designated for burning, and the entire group is exempt from participating in the second Pesach, but none of them eat meat that night. That's if they don't know which one was slaughtered first. Now, if he did not say anything to them, and they did not say anything to him, he just went off to look for it, but they didn't give him any instructions that they wanted to be included in the lamb if he slaughtered on their behalf, and he didn't give them any instructions that if they slaughtered a replacement, he wanted to be included in that. He just went to look, they watched him go, nobody said anything. In that situation, they are not responsible for each other. And the members of the group eat their Paschal lamb, while the individual sent to find the lost animal eats from his own offering. And the reason for this is that the individual is registered only for the original offering, while the other members of the group clearly withdrew from that lost offering because they sacrificed a new replacement Paschal lamb. And that's that. Now, two groups whose Paschal lambs have become intermingled, this is a different situation. Two groups, separate groups, each has their lamb, and the lambs became intermingled, and the two groups don't know which lamb belongs to which group. In that situation, these members of the first group draw one of the animals separated as a Paschal lamb for themselves, and those members of the second group draw one of the lambs for themselves. And then one of the members of the first group goes over to the second group, and one of the members of the second group comes over to the first group, right? So the two groups, they just, sort of randomly, each group takes a lamb, but then each of the groups sends one of its members to go join the other group. They have an exchange, right? A member exchange. And then, hold on, and this is what each group says to the new member that the other group sent over. If this Paschal lamb that is now in our possession is ours, so you are withdrawn from the Paschal lamb that was yours, and you are registered for our Paschal lamb, you've joined our group and you may eat from it. And if this Paschal lamb is yours, it's actually the lamb that belonged to the group you came from, then we are hereby withdrawn from our original lamb, and we are registered for your Paschal lamb, which you agreed to share with us. And the other group makes the same statement to their new member. And similarly, if there were 5 groups of 5 people each and of 10 people each, and they draw one person from each and every group, and they say this statement mentioned in the case of 2 groups, and the remaining member or members of each group will grant the representatives of the other groups that have come to join them a share in the Paschal lamb, and they will acquire a share in it for themselves, in case the animal that they have chosen belonged originally to one of the other groups. So this is a way to handle that when groups, have their lambs have become commingled and no one is sure which lamb belonged to each group. So now you mingle the groups, and in each group you make this statement: if this is our original lamb, the new person joins it. And if we got your lamb, then we're all joining that group. And this way, that none of the lambs was ever without a person registered to it, and at least one of the original members is in the new group, and so everybody's able to handle the situation, and the lambs get slaughtered properly and eaten properly. It's not ideal. They never should have been commingled in the first place, but we're living in the real world where mistakes happen, and this is how the sages would recommend you handle that. And in the case of 2 individuals whose Paschal lambs became intermingled, and each person was the only one registered for his offering, so now there's 2 groups of just one person each, and their lambs became mingled. Now what do? Can they make this kind of declaration? But they can't send a person over to the other group because there's only one person per group. And if they just trade, well, then maybe they now there's a moment when the lambs don't have owners. That's the issue here. So how do they combat that? So what do? This person, one of the persons, draws one of the Paschal lambs for himself, and that person draws one for himself. So they just randomly say, okay, you take this one, I'll take that one. We're not sure if this is my original or that one, but we're just going to take one. And then each of them registers someone from the marketplace with him on his Paschal lamb, and that one does the same thing, registering one from the marketplace. So now you need to have multiple people on the lamb. So what you need to find is some Jew who's hanging around in Jerusalem who somehow didn't get registered to some other group and say, come join me so that you can help me. Now you can be part of my group. Now you can be like one of the original members, and then me and the other guy can switch, and we can have that same situation as where there were multiple groups with multiple members, and they each exchanged one person to the new group, and they make that statement, and that's how they would handle it. Once this is done, this one comes to that person from the marketplace, has been added to this person's sacrifice, and that one who brought a person from the marketplace has come into his group. And then the statement that they make is, if this Paschal lamb is mine, you are withdrawn from yours, and you are registered for mine. And if this Paschal lamb I am withdrawn from is mine, and I'm hereby registered for yours, as described previously. And the reason it is necessary for each individual to add an additional person from the marketplace, meaning just some new person, to his Paschal lamb, is to ensure that when each person withdraws from his original Paschal lamb and registers for the other, no Paschal lamb will be left ownerless for any amount of time. That's the Mishnah, one of the longest Mishnahs we've encountered. Now we go to the Gemara, which is much shorter. Rare, the Gemara is shorter than the Mishnah here. The Gemara says, the sages taught, if he, the agent, said to the other members of the group that if they slaughter the Paschal lamb first, they should include him, and they said to him that if he slaughters his Paschal lamb first, he should include them, all of them eat from the first Paschal lamb that was slaughtered, and the second one must be burned. But if he did not say this to them, and they did not say this to him, then they're not responsible for each other, and each side gets to eat its lamb, and no lambs get burned. No lamb goes to waste. And from this, right, so they were better off when they said nothing to each other than when they appointed each other to be agents. You know, if you find the lamb slaughter on our behalf, and as he's leaving, he says, well, if you end up replacing the lamb because I haven't come back in time, then the one you slaughter, I want to be included in it. When they each give each other those instructions, depending on how the circumstances turn out, one of the lambs could easily end up being rendered unfit and has to be burned. So they're better off when they don't say anything to each other. And from this, the sages stated, the famous saying of the Talmud, from this the sages stated, silence is fitting for the wise, and all the more so for fools. I really can't improve on that. Just let it stand. Now, in the case under discussion, had neither side appointed the other to slaughter the Paschal lamb on its behalf, both offerings would be valid and would be consumed. When each side appointed the other to slaughter the Paschal lamb on its behalf, only the first one slaughtered may be eaten, while the second one must be burned. This is as it is stated, Proverbs 17:28, even a fool, when he holds his peace, is considered wise. And he that shuts his lips is esteemed as a man of understanding. So there you have it, put two beautiful ways. From the sages, silence is fitting for the wise, and all the more so for fools. From King Solomon, writing in Proverbs, even a fool when he holds his peace is considered wise, and he that shuts his lips is esteemed as a man of understanding. And more modern rendition is better to be silent and thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. Often credited to Abraham Lincoln, but I don't believe Abraham Lincoln is the first one to say that. The Mishnah addressed the question of what two individuals whose Paschal lambs were intermingled should do. The Gemara suggests, well, let us say that the Mishnah is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, because it was taught in a Baraisa that the verse states, Exodus 12:4, and if the household be too little for a lamb, which teaches that the members of the group may keep decreasing. You can take away members from a group, provided that one of the original members remains. And the Baraisa teaches you can take people away from a group registered for a lamb, but you can never empty the group. There has to be at least one person remaining, because otherwise the lamb would at a certain point be registered for no person. It's a consecrated Passover lamb with no people that it's registered for, and at that moment it's rendered unfit. And even if you then register a person for it, it's too late. It's been made unfit. It's going to have to, if it hasn't been slaughtered yet, it's going to have to go out to graze until it develops a blemish and then exchange for money, but it can no longer be used as an offering. And if it was already slaughtered when this happens, it can only be burned. It's not going to be able to be eaten. So we always want to leave one person on it. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosei says, it is permissible for them to withdraw, provided they do not leave the Paschal lamb for any amount of time on its own. Sounds like the same thing, without anyone registered for it. In the Mishna, the two original owners forego their shares in their own Paschal lambs, and the only remaining members of each group are the people who were added from the marketplace who were not the original owners from the time the animal was separated as a Paschal lamb. This is apparently not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Right? There may be a person registered to it, but not one of the original members. That's the difference. Rabbi Yosei said there just has to be one person. Rabbi Yehuda seemed to say there has to be one person. He has to be one of the original members of the group, not somebody who was just brought in later. Rabbi Yochanan said, even if you say that the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, since Rabbi Yehuda said elsewhere that one may not slaughter the Paschal lamb for an individual, meaning that there must be at least two people registered for each Paschal lamb. In this case, in which only one person was registered for a Paschal lamb, from the beginning it stood to have another person registered with the original owner. Therefore, the person who joins later is like one of the original members of the group. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan is saying, according to Rabbi Yehuda, there has to be at least two people. Since there's a moment where there's only going to be one person, it's understood that we're just waiting for that second person to come because there is no Paschal lamb without two registrants at least. That's just the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The halakha is it can be for one. Rabbi Ashi said, the Mishnah is also precisely worded in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, as it teaches, and similarly 5 groups of 5 each. This indicates that if each group has 5, yes, the solution of sending 4 of them to join other groups is viable. But if there were 4 groups of 5 and the 5th group only had 4 people in it, then there's no way to employ the solution of the Mishnah. It is not because none of the original members of the group would remain with it if all 4 members of the group would join other 4 groups, and it is prohibited, isn't not because each of them would go out to the other groups, and therefore, with it, if all 4 members of the group would join the other 4 groups, and it is prohibited to leave a Paschal lamb without any original members of its group, the Gemara concludes, indeed, learn from it that the Mishnah does follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, the Mishnah does not contradict the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And with that, we conclude chapter 9. Chapter 9, largely about Pesach Sheni, and why? Because, and then related laws of what happens when a Pesach is disqualified and people don't fulfill their obligation, and therefore they're going to have to come back again a month later for Pesach Sheni. We now leave chapter 9, we're going to chapter 10. Chapter 10 contains so many of the familiar aspects of Passover. In chapter 10, we're going to be studying material that you find in the Haggadah, part of the Seder that is we still do 2,000 years later. So much about the Paschal lamb, the offering. We haven't brought offerings since the temple was destroyed. We do eat the matzah and the bitter herb, and we eat them together as a commemoration of the lamb, but we haven't been able to bring that offering in 2,000 years. But we certainly do have the Passover Seder. We have the Seder of the Passover Night, the order of the Passover Night. And our first Mishnah is going to discuss about the need to have 4 cups of wine with it. So before I do that, let me just share a few verses from the Torah on which much of the learning here in chapter 10 is going to be based. So Exodus 12:27, that you shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Paschal offering, for he passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses. And the people bowed the head and worshipped. That's Exodus 12:27. At Exodus 13:8, and you shall tell your son on that day, it is because of this which the Lord did for me when I came forth out of Egypt. That is one of the key teachings of the Passover Seder. You say to the next generation, we celebrate this Passover because of that which the Lord did for me when I came forth out of Egypt. Did I come out of Egypt over 3,000 years ago? I mean, maybe I was reincarnated, maybe I was a soul that was there, but not me, Sal Litvak. Why would I say to my son, this is what the Lord did for me? And from that we learn that the sages tell us every Jew is commanded at the Passover Seder to consider as if she or he personally was redeemed from slavery in Egypt. And that's one of the reasons, one of the most powerful reasons why Jewish continuity is so strong and why this very small people that's been persecuted all over the world is still here, while much, much greater civilizations, like all of them that existed 3,000 years ago, are gone. You know, what continuous people, what continuous civilization can you look at that was around then that is still around now? Not many. Not many, and certainly not one as, as small in number as the Jewish people. And a third verse from Exodus 13:14, and it shall be when your son asks you in the time to come, saying, what is this? That you shall say to him, by strength of hand, the Lord brought us out from Egypt, from the house of bondage. And of course, that's going to be the source for the questions, the 4 questions that the youngest is meant to ask at the Passover Seder, because your child should be asking you. And if he's not asking you questions, you're going to teach him to ask questions. And again, that is one of the secrets of Jewish survival. This is not a religion where there's a catechism and you learn the rules and repeat them and you're done. You are commanded to ask questions, and if you don't understand, ask more questions. And the proper way to learn is to ask and answer questions back and forth. Not only does the teacher sort of quiz the student by asking questions, but it's expected that the student will quiz the teacher by asking questions and looking for answers. So, the first Mishna of chapter 10, in which we start to study the Passover Seder, we learn on Erev Pesach, right? So the eve of Passover, meaning the afternoon of the 14th of the Hebrew month of Nisan. Passover begins that night when it becomes a new day on the Hebrew calendar, which always happens at nightfall. So Passover begins on the night of the 15th of the Hebrew month of Nisan. During the afternoon of the 14th, or all day of the 14th, that's Erev Pesach, but it's that afternoon when, what are we responsible to do, as we've now learned many times? When the temple is standing, that is when the Pesach is slaughtered, when the Paschal offering is slaughtered that afternoon. Okay, what else do we do on that afternoon? So on Erev Pesach, adjacent to Mincha time, the time of the afternoon prayer, a person may not eat until dark, so that he will be able to eat matzah that night with a hearty appetite. Even the poorest of Jews should not eat the meal on Passover night until he reclines on his left side. Right? Who eats like this? I mean, we're accustomed that, in a movie, you see people at a fancy dinner party, everyone is sitting straight up, even if they're very, very rich people at a very, very fancy dinner party. But the sages are writing in the milieu, right, that these traditions are being born in the Second Temple period, which is dominated by the Greek empire in the world, and the very rich and privileged people in that world, and of course in Rome as well, didn't sit around a table in upright chairs, right? They sat on couches or divans around a low table and had all the food right out in front of them, and had the time and the leisure and the privilege to discuss ideas without having to run off to work on the farm. And so no matter how poor and how much of a working class person you are, if you're a Jew, on the night of Passover, you have to be able to act like a rich, privileged person and recline and lean to your left and have a feast worth of food to eat, and as we'll see, to drink. So even the poorest of Jews should not eat the meal on Passover night until he reclines on his left side, as free and wealthy people recline when they eat. And the distributors of charity should not give a poor person less than 4 cups of wine for the festival meal of Passover night. And this halacha, this law, applies even if the poor person is one of the poorest members of society and receives all of his food from the charity plate. Right? So even if all year long he just eats from the kindness of the community, on Passover we set him up with a feast. He eats like a king, and his feast includes 4 cups of wine. Now tomorrow we'll get into the Gemara interpreting these 4 cups of wine, what they symbolize, what they mean. For today, I would just like to share a personal reflection. For a long time at our Seder, we tell people who are going to be participating in our Seder in advance. And my friends, we are less than 1 month from Passover. So this teaching is perfectly placed to learn, for you to hear this right now. If you are a Jew and you are looking forward to Passover, it's less than a month away. And always, every Jewish holiday, we start learning its laws and customs 1 month in advance. So a beautiful practice that you can do is when you celebrate the Seder and we read the Passover Haggadah and we recite the tale, the story of God redeeming us from slavery in Egypt and saving us from Pharaoh. Pharaoh represents the totality of the enslavement. We were all slaves of Pharaoh, as it were. So when we read the Haggadah, some people can connect on a very spiritual level to the Haggadah as it is. Other people think it's a little remote. This story that happened 3,000 years ago. Okay, we say the story. I mean, how's that going to change my life? The way it can change your life is if you understand that you too have a Pharaoh. Everyone has a Pharaoh. Who is Pharaoh to us in modern times? Pharaoh is that behavior that enslaves us, that destructive behavior. It could be self-destructive. It could be toxic to the people around us. It could be minor. It could be major. But we all have some behaviors that we know we shouldn't be doing that. And yet we do it anyway. That's a form of enslavement. If we know we shouldn't do something and we do it anyway against our own will, against our interests and against the interests of our loved ones and those around us, and we wish to stop and we want to stop and we have failed to stop, that's Pharaoh. Now, if you think to yourself, okay, Passover is coming up, what is my Pharaoh? Sometimes the answer is immediately apparent. Sometimes it takes some thought. That's why it's good to start thinking about it now. But at a certain point, you say, yeah, that is my Pharaoh, and this is the year I'm going to break free. Now, you can't do it alone. You haven't been able to do it alone. You've said many times, I resolve to stop this behavior, and here you are still doing it. So you say, please, God, save me from my Pharaoh. We're going to cry out to God like the children of Israel cried out in Egypt. And on Passover night, when we read the Haggadah, every time Pharaoh is mentioned, you don't have to share this with your table mates if it's a private matter. But every time you read about Pharaoh enslaving us, oh, that's my Pharaoh. And this is the year I want to break free. And like the children of Israel, I'm crying out to God, please, God, help me. Please, God, help me. And you're going to resolve that night to break free. That's the night you're going to be liberated. How do these 4 cups of wine fit? Your 4 cups of wine, as we've been told, well, this is how a rich person, how a person of leisure dines in a relaxed manner with lots of great food and the 4 cups of wine. Even if those cups were diluted, as they often were in the old days, at 4 cups of wine, you're going to feel the intoxication of that. Hopefully it's not going to be terrible. You're not going to be drunk, but you're definitely going to be tipsy and sort of have a vision of yourself that is maybe in the midst of that celebration. It's almost like you're going to have a vision of yourself when you've overcome this enslavement. You're not going to be enslaved to that behavior right there at the Passover Seder at the very moment that you're breaking free of it. So probably that night you can kind of feel like a new you and the wine helps. Now, this is similar to a New Year's resolution when, New Year's Eve, people drink a whole bunch of booze and they say, I resolve that starting tomorrow, I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to be more active or less passive, or I'm going to get on that diet, I'm going to stop smoking, I'm going to get on the exercise machine, I'm going to call my parents. All those kinds of resolutions made in drunkenness, and then the next day hungover, you're going to have to start living a tough life. Maybe I'll put it off another day. And those New Year's resolutions amount to nothing. But the resolution to break free of Pharaoh with God's help that begins at Passover is infinitely more likely to succeed because it is backed up by the Omer. The counting of the Omer, which begins on the second night of Passover, and we count 49 days, and every day we check in with the new self that is breaking free of Pharaoh and examine how it's going. How is the new you doing? And examine how the new you is doing according to the emotional faculties which are associated with the counting of the Omer. We won't go into that tonight. You can look it up. Counting the Omer, sort of Kabbalistic counting with the Sephiros. Enough for tonight to say that each night you're going to examine how you're doing and examine one of your emotional aspects. Am I kind enough? Am I too kind? Am I judgmental? Am I not judgmental enough? Am I balancing things? Am I way out of whack? Am I, getting organized in a way that will endure, or am I disorganized? Am I keeping my goal before me or not? Is it becoming part of my foundational principles or not? These are the kinds of questions that I get asked every day of counting the Omer. And with that kind of 49-day backup of seeing, is this new you going to take hold, you're much more likely to succeed. And so those 4 cups allow you to kind of inhabit the skin of one who is free. That's the whole idea. You're free. You are reclining. You're at ease because you're a free woman or a free man. And the wine helps us feel that freedom. Then the next day you're back in your regular life, but you've got God's help. You've asked for it. You've named your Pharaoh. You are now much more likely to be liberated from Pharaoh. That's what I've got for us tonight. Let us check your comments and questions. Okay, this is Pesachim 99. So just to be clear, this is Bill. So just to be clear that I've kept up with this somewhat twisting bit of law. If one member of the group goes off to look for the lost offering, and neither the group nor the member says anything, then, and assuming he finds the lamb, and they, while he was gone, thought he might not be coming back in time, so they slaughter their own replacement lamb, then both eat what they've got, right? Right, you got it, Bill. And doesn't that sort of mean that the best practice in such situations would be to avoid instructions altogether? You must have written that comment before you heard the sages say just that. Offer nothing, say nothing. Silence is fitting for the wise. Rochelle says, can one person end up having to consume an entire lamb? Yes, right? We saw that the minimum number of people that can be registered for a lamb is 1. You can have a group of 1. Now, if he doesn't eat the whole thing, in the morning, whatever's left over is disqualified and it has to be burned. But that is a correction for a transgression. There's not a punishment, but that's what the positive mitzvah that corrects the transgression. The transgression is leaving any over. So it would be much better if he ate his whole lamb. So ideally, this is a very hungry person who slaughtered a very small lamb, and then he feels that he can eat the whole thing. But that's why, of course, it's really a strange situation where for some reason she ends up alone. Much better should be part of a group where they're all confident that the whole lamb will be eaten before daylight, or some say before midnight. Christoph asks, do we slaughter a lamb for Pesach? I think he means, do we still do it? And the answer is no, as I've explained. We haven't done that in 2,000 years. And because we don't slaughter a lamb as an offering in the temple in Jerusalem, because the temple was destroyed 2,000 years ago, the sages further decreed that we don't eat lamb at all. Now, some people will, in a way that is definitely distinguished from what an offering would be, so that there is no confusion, that people might think that he's bringing an offering. And I've heard that there are some traditions that even do eat lamb at Passover, but the sort of, for most of the Jewish world, no lamb at Passover for that reason. Steve says, when was the Seder of Passover set? Do we know which year? Yeah, in the sense, well, if you're saying the Seder of Passover, when did the Seder achieve its modern form? Okay, so that developed a little over time. And I'm not sure when they're going to say, the Seder was fully in place. But the idea of sitting down to the Paschal lamb and eating it with matzah and bitter herb and recounting the Exodus from Egypt, maybe even if the Haggadah was obviously not written out, because the Haggadah includes a Mishna in it, so that, as it was set down in the Mishna, so that would be much later. The Mishnah wasn't set down until the year 200. But celebrating the Seder essentially goes all the way back to the first time in Egypt. You might say the one in Egypt was quite different from the one the next year. And so the next year is about, really it was set in the first year in the desert. And that was about 3,300 years ago, a little bit more. I forget the exact number, but you can look that up pretty easily. Sharon Frant Brooks, why does the Haggadah attribute that response to what is said to the wicked son? Because of what the Lord did for me. That does not appear to be what this Mishnah is saying. Well, we're going to get to that a little later, right? So we distinguish the sons at the Haggadah, really the children, let's say. The wise child is the one that wants to learn all the laws, so that the oral law, the Torah, is passed down from generation to generation. The wicked son says, "What is this to you? To you and not to me. Had he been there, he would not have redeemed," is the way it's put in the Haggadah. But really, it's a lesson on that Jew that removes him or herself from the Jewish people. And they really do endanger themselves and their descendants from being lost to the Jewish people, because they take this stance of, this is not for me. What does it mean to you? But I'm not included in it. Then there's the simple son who just says, "What is it?" And then there's the one that doesn't even know how to ask. And the one that doesn't even know how to ask is where we want to train them to ask. And it's also been said in more recent years that there's a fifth child that tragically isn't even at the Seder. And that's this, majority, tragically, of the Jewish people who are so disconnected from Judaism. And of course, that's one of the tragedies that we're trying to fight here by putting Jewish wisdom out there in an accessible way. And finally, Sharon says, in addition to Pharaoh, Mitzrayim means in the narrow place, restriction. We need to confront the things that restrict us. Absolutely, right? One of those behaviors that could be a destructive behavior is a lack of proper acknowledgement of self-worth, right? I mean, we should be so confident in our ability to change not only ourselves, but by changing ourselves, then start to create change around us. And if we have an idea for a project that could benefit a lot of people, and then we say, who am I to start something like that? No one's going to follow me. It's not going to happen. It's just going to be a futile effort. That also is a destructive, a harmful behavior. And so maybe a person needs to learn to believe in themselves more so that they can start to fulfill the mission for which they came into this world as a soul now inhabiting a body. All right, my friends, that's what I've got for us tonight. So tomorrow we'll start getting into the sages' discussion of this Mishnah, that even the poorest among the Jews must be able to feel free and privileged on Passover night, and that includes to eat well, to recline, and to drink 4 cups of wine. With God's help, see you tomorrow.